Ladies and gentlemen, Karen.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Right. So, are you change makers or change takers? It's an interesting concept, and when we use those words, they can be quite emotive. Everyone wants to be a change maker. It's exciting, it's interesting, it sounds like you drive things forward. Change taking sounds passive, maybe a little bit on the back foot, something's being done to you. The reality of it is we're all change makers and change takers, and depending on where we are in our lives and what's happening, our ability to deal with both of those sometimes difficult subjects is key. When we talk about being change takers, certainly, it feels like it's a very external thing. It's something happening to us, and it's not something we can influence. But personally, I don't believe that's true. I think change is a very personal thing, and it affects us all in different ways. So our ability to handle it is key. So how does change make you feel? Well, I like to think I feel like this little guy who's not there. There is nothing, and nobody is running to help me. Press what? VGAs is there. Oh, this one. Pushing. Nothing happening. I could theatrically sob. Would it help?
I'm going to start swearing at it.
Well, that wouldn't be very helpful as things go.
No input is detected.
Okay, make it work. I'm head of IT at 3 ports.
It's all right, I'm CTO at 3 companies.
Oh, good. You see, he is more qualified than I am to solve this problem. Oh no, this looks bad.
Oh, change the resolution. John Skeet, answer of all questions.
It's very important to deal with change effectively. Oh, there we have another helper. I might stand up here, I can't see everybody. It does the first screen, but not the second screen. You can go to the next slide. No, that is, why does it not like the middle slides? If I saved it as a PDF, may it help? There are no fancy animations, nothing appears.
Also, I have a number of different adapters. So.
Right, let's try and save it as a PDF and see what happens.
Let's just quickly. Let's try that.
Right. Okay, that's his home screen. Do you want me to open it on the PDF?
Try it now, because I've just tried with the different adapters.
Okay. Birds?
Right, so we need to...
If we duplicate.
Yep.
Yes! See? Right, so now we're back in the room. So this little chap is how I feel faced with change, like we just had here. I think that's how we all like to think we feel. You know, change can be exciting, it can drive us forward, it can change the worlds we live in, and ultimately it can make us discover new things about ourselves and the people around us. So feeling empowered and feeling excited about change is really great. But sometimes, maybe it's a bit more like this. Certainly personality has a large amount to do with it, because people may crave stability. Some people can be very unsettled by change. Depending on what's going on in your home life, in the things around you, in the general global context, sometimes you just want things to stay the same. Sometimes as people, we almost need things to stay the same. So what happens when absolutely nothing is staying the same? Now, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, I think it's fair to say that the world that we live in today is changing faster than we could ever have imagined it would do. And I think it's not so much the way, it is the way it's changing even more than the pace, because increasingly we're becoming a polarized society. So from a time when, certainly in Great Britain, we've got a great context of democracy where we try to find the middle ground and we try to find ways that suit most of the people most of the time. We're now in a world where people are either on one camp or they're on the other. And but the people on one camp is a landmark movement forward, to the others will be a draconian step. So it certainly is a difficult landscape. Then, of course, we've got the debacle that is the last 3 years. And again, I'm not going to call any kind of judgment on the outcome of that, because it's not mine to say, and we've all got a personal opinion. But I'm quite certain that from a point of view of a case study for our children and our children's children about how not to conceive, debate and execute change, this one will go down in the history. Our leaders have led us well. Again, like I say, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, but I think we've all learnt a valuable lesson about the fact that inaction in change is very difficult. And at the end of the day, what do you do when everybody needs to find a middle ground and they can't or won't do it? And then what happens when you simply don't have time? What happens when the failure to act on change is in itself change? And again, we're looking globally here, but the world is changing, and it's changing in such a way that if we don't do something about it, it's just going to keep changing, and we won't be able to arrest that change if it gets too far. So it's really interesting that now we are starting to see a swell of people who are willing and able and prepared to make the kind of compromises that we need to make to affect and impact that. But it's not all doom and gloom. If we look at some of the things that have happened in the technology space, in the science space, and in medicine in the recent years, the world is changing beyond all recognition. If we think about 40 years ago, where HIV was the scariest thing anyone had ever heard of, and nowadays people who live with HIV are able to do so, lead normal lives, and not be at risk to any of their loved ones. It's incredible what can be achieved, and the one thing that all these medical professionals have in common is they believe that nothing is impossible. And if nothing is impossible, then by definition, everything is possible. So if we continue to look at change in our environment and believe in what we can do amazing things. So who am I, and why am I having the pleasure to talk to you good people today? Well, this is me, a younger me, back when I was 18 years old. You can probably tell from the decor that this was taken in a student house. This indeed is the night of my freshers' ball. I am still not sure why somebody took a picture of me cleaning my teeth, but they did. And actually, I like this picture. Without getting all the X factor on you, I didn't have an easy childhood. It wasn't the best. We've all got a backstory. But in this picture, I'd escaped all of that and I'd gone to university. I was going to become someone. I had a life plan. It involved getting married by 25, which in my mind back then was positively ancient. I was going to have a house. I was going to have a car. I was going to have a husband, quite clearly. I had no idea how I was going to achieve these things, but this is what I was going to do. I was going to pay my bills. I had possibility endlessly oozing out of me. And that's why I love this picture, because I can see it in my face. In this picture, I'm going on the pull and I'm there. I'm happy and I'm doing what I want to be doing. Since this picture was taken, I've worked in software testing, I've worked in change management, I've been head of IT at Stansted Airport during the London 2012 Olympics, I've been IT director for Suffolk Police, I've worked in Essex Police, I've worked in e-commerce companies, I've done all sorts of things. I have been, well, I'd like to say quite successful in my life, and I'm very happy. It's all good. So clearly my plan came off. Everything went according to plan. Well, it didn't quite go according to plan. 2 years after this picture was taken, this was me. Now, we don't need to look too closely at the two faces in this picture to know that this was not a happy time. So this is me, and this is my little boy, Jake. 2 months after my 20th birthday, I gave birth to my son. I was at university living the dream. I was on the pull at Freshers' Week. Everything was going well. And I got a phone call from my mum. She was being evicted. She didn't have any money. So I gave her my student grant, and I had no money to my name, so I quit university. Then I became, frankly, a loser for about a year and wound up getting pregnant. Now I take full responsibility for that decision, clearly, because I was there and in the room. But the reality of it is, this was not my life plan. By the time I was 20 years old, I was signing up for a council flat, I was on benefits, I was a single mum. I was everything I promised myself I didn't want to be. And I was horrible at it. I mean, frankly horrible. To be something you don't want to be when you're 20 years old is really crap. I spent my first Christmas Day on my own at 21. If you know someone that spends Christmas Day on their own, invite them around for dinner, because it's rubbish. So I had a couple of very difficult years. Now, how I got from there to here is another story in itself. And it would take me a lot longer than the time I've got to tell you all about it. But what I've learned is, as I moved through my journey and I started to get jobs and I started to move on, I've had the pleasure of meeting some very successful people. I've been trained in how to handle change. I've been inspired by Olympians and people that have had difficult problems, because it appears to me the more successful you are and the higher you get, the more people tell you how to handle this stuff, which is fabulous, but no one was there helping me when I was needing it back in those days. Big shout out to my best friend in the whole world, who's in the audience watching me today, because she was there in the darkness, and sometimes that's all you need. So, that's me, that's why I'm here talking to you today, and hopefully I can bring some life to this conversation. So when we talk about change, what exactly are we talking about? Well, there's a lot of buzzwords in this area. Change management. I love these pictures. Amazing what you can turn up if you Google it. This is management. We should do some of this. Change management, the grief curve, every change topic, conversation, training course we've ever been on. I'm currently being change trained for about the 7th time in my life. There's a place for this stuff. So I Googled what is change management. Change management is the structured approach and application of processes to execute the people side of change. Well, that's really important, because if people don't change, the world doesn't change. Nothing that you're trying to embed changes. So it's really important. It's important if you work in technology, it's important if you work in business, it's important if you're trying to change things in your own life. But it appears we're not talking about change management so much anymore. Now we're talking about leadership. I was trying to keep it local, you know. What is leadership? Well, leadership is taking the highs and the lows, isn't it? I also looked up what is leadership. Leadership is inspiring other people around you to do the change. It's providing the resources they need to make change happen and be successful. I know nothing about football. I know this isn't going very well at the moment, and I'm sorry for all of you if you are supporters of Norwich, but I'm sure this man has got it. And I like his voice very much. We also talk about agility. So now we don't just want to do change, we want to do it quickly. We want to get change out there. We want to impact our user base. We want to impact the people around us. We want to be quick, quick, quick. The thing about agile and agility and all the rest of it is clearly you only plan for your next iteration. You're only planning 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You may have a vague vision, but you don't really know how it's going to be at the end. So if you're trying to take people on your journey, how are you doing that if you can't clearly articulate what the end state is? Now, obviously, there's a lot of benefits in Agile in terms of iteration, and the change curve or change experience is much more gentle. So I think there is a lot of benefit to this, but it does leave a little bit of complexity around some of the management techniques we may have previously been taught. Then we talk about product-driven development. It's hard to find a Google picture for product-driven development. Immersive experiences, where IT people, creative people, design people, product people, all sit together, your marketeers, your users, and together they form an idea about how to evolve this product. Again, it's highly powerful, but the things we've been taught to date as to how to manage change in our organizations and in ourselves aren't necessarily in line with this. We're normally used to somebody having the responsibility to decide how something's done. Somebody sets a direction. And ultimately, as human beings, we like to have a leader. So when we're all cooperating, how do we really understand how we're all managing this, how we're adapting to this change and how we're feeling? So that's sort of the change what. Now on to what change. Well, the things I'm going to talk to you about should really be appropriate in every area of your life. So the first and most obvious one for you guys as a general audience is technology change. Technology change is undoubtedly the fastest and most explosive change affecting our global our global world. Well, that is the world today. If we think back to the Industrial Revolution and the impact that had on people's lives and jobs and how the world worked, that was a much slower change. So people graduated, they changed, they evolved with it, they moved on to do new jobs. And the reason I think that this is different is because if we think about the Industrial Revolution and the industry and the industrialization of certain process, the technologies and machines and things that were designed to make that change were fit for the purpose for which they were made. So if people wanted to expand the use of that technology, they needed to make new machines that were specific for the purpose. It all takes time. But what we see today in technology is that it isn't necessarily applied for the purpose for which it's made. Increasingly, we make capabilities that can be used by anybody who's got the imagination to apply them to a problem. So if we think about holidays, we think about Airbnb. Airbnb are not a holiday company. They're a technology company with a good idea. They do search. They do price optimization. They are essentially just a tech company that know what they're doing. Every disruptor today that we see against our businesses is basically somebody's clever use of something that's already there. So the one thing I want to talk about technology change as well, though, is it is really impacting people's lives. And I think all of us that work in technology have got a social responsibility to understand that in some detail and understand the impact it has to people. You only need to see somebody who's a lot older trying to deal with online banking or, trying to pin their pin in Tesco's. It can be quite unsettling. Although I don't think we can stop this, and I don't think we should try, I do think we need to bear that in mind, and therefore it focuses us on really understanding how people deal with change and how we can make this appropriate for them. Business. Yeah. I like this guy, he makes me smile. So you maybe you do work directly in technology, maybe you don't. Maybe you run your own business, maybe you're considering starting your own business. Maybe you've got a business that's very successful and you're thinking about how to continue to grow that business, just like this chap here. It is just an exploration of change management. If you're in charge, it will also be a lot about change leadership. Unless you're a one-man band, you're going to need to understand how to motivate your team, how to get them on your side, how to get them to understand where you're going, and how to drive that for you so you're not the one that's there having to do it all the time. So we need to embody this chap, and we need to understand how we make our lives as happy as his. Teams. I think these people look like they're in a pub. So maybe this is how we motivate our teams. This is I get employed a lot to do this stuff. Transformation of departments. Taking a group of people that are misunderstood or, people think they're a bit crap. And they're not. They're just misunderstood. They're always, what I find in these situations is it's a misalignment between the business and the people that are trying to work in technology. It's finding a way to elevate those people, to build those bridges, but ultimately it is sometimes about organizational change. Now this can be very hard, and I think when we talk about organizational change, it can be a very emotive subject because we do know that we don't live in a one job for the rest of your life scenario these days, so it can be very hard for individuals, and we should respect that. But how you execute change in people and how you execute change in teams is absolutely critical to the success of you, your businesses, and everything that you will do moving forward. So everything we're going to talk about here could also be applied to that circumstance. Product development. So we've talked about product-driven development. How you iterate your product as an individual. How do you decide what user features to code next? How do you decide when to bring things to market? How do you decide if your customer base is ready for what you've got going on? We've seen some really high-profile examples of some very bad introductions to market. TSB's innocuous hardware change that caused a lot of people a lot of problems and destroyed their reputation. Understanding and executing good change in a product roadmap is absolutely critical. And finally, and probably most importantly, relationships. It could be someone that you are in a relationship with. This could be with your kids. It could be with your boss. It doesn't matter who it is, but how you change your relationships and how you execute that change and how you receive that change when you are on the receiving end of it will ultimately be more important than any of the other things we've spoken about today. This is the stuff that makes the difference between happy and sad, and it makes the difference between feeling valued or not valued. So when we think about how we manage our lives and how we manage the things around us, I think sometimes we can be very eloquent and very concise and very considered about how we execute change at work, but do we add that same level of thought to the things that we want to change close to home? Probably not. But you've got this. We talked about kids earlier. Anybody that's ever been handed one of these in a hospital and told to take it home has honestly thought, what the hell are you doing, to the nurse that's handed it over? I am not ready for this. This is a mistake. I may have had 9 months planning for this moment, but I have no idea what to do with this small thing. You get it. And if you've never had a baby, you've all been teenagers. You've all gone through a period in your life of complete turmoil. When I look back at my teenage years, I would not relive those years for anything. But we all change, we all age, we all learn new experiences, and we all adapt and grow as we as individuals grow and as we learn more about ourselves and the world around us. So we talk about change as this abstract concept, but actually it's a very integral part of being a human being. And the reason why I think this is so important is because bad change really hurts. You know, bad change is a very personal experience. It can be deeply destructive. Whether that's, you know, the age-old CIO comes in who's been at 15 different companies that do something kind of like you do, and already knows all the people that he knows that are credible or she knows, brings them in, trounces all over your world, and then buggers off 2 years later and leaves you to pick up the pieces. We've all been there. This is painful stuff. You know, when you've been in a company and you've worked a long time and you've built your reputation and you find your opportunities slipping away from you and you don't seem to get a chance to speak, that's not fun. So let's all recognize the importance of doing this properly, because it has a deeply personal impact to us and the people around us. So hopefully that's set a bit of the context. And now I'm going to give you my top tips. And yes, it did auto-populate the picture of the top tips. The first question is why? Now this might sound deeply obvious, but it still is a mystery to me, the number of teams I see trying to execute change programs who haven't got a clue why they're doing it. They have been asked to achieve an outcome, but they don't actually understand why. And this is the number one way to execute failure. When I was at Stansted Airport, I was asked to do the separation of Stansted from Heathrow post the sale of Manchester, well, purchased by Manchester Airport Group. We had to separate 66 systems as quickly as we physically could. And we did it in 10 months. It saved the company £6 million over that 10 months for a variety of reasons. The whole purpose of that separation was to be separate as quickly as we possibly could to save money, and that was the only reason that we chose the path that we chose. And it was really important because every decision that was taken from that point forward from anybody in a position of influence was taken to support that outcome. If you are trying to execute change, even if you know what the end state is meant to be, if you don't understand the reasons why, it is virtually impossible to make the decisions as a collective group that will get you to that end state. Is it okay to cut this feature out during the iteration? Is it okay to overspend? Is it okay to disrupt that product over there? Who knows? Who knows if you don't know why you're doing it? If you are the maker of change and not the taker, it is absolutely critical you understand why you want this change to happen, and you write it down and you share it with the people you're asking to execute it for. You need to share the reasons why, and you share how you're going to measure the success of that change. If that's just saving money, great. If that's user experience, great, but you must share it. It is an imperative of making change happen. If you're a taker of change, and you can't get clarity about why you're doing it, at least write down why you think you're doing it. Because you have to have a place to base your thoughts. So write it down, send it to the person that's making the change, and say, I'm working off these assumptions. This is why I think we're doing this. Now, if you were in your personal life, maybe you are in a situation where you're trying to make a change, you're trying to change things at home, maybe you're trying to get your children to operate in a different way, which is always fun. In that sense, writing it down may seem a little bit OTT, but it's not. You know, really write it down. Think about it. Why do you want this person to change? Why is it important to you that your kid cleans their room? Why does it matter that they spend 10 hours at the weekend watching YouTube videos? And that happens. Really write it down, understand why it's important, because often, especially with children, I think we can be quite draconian and come up with rules because it's what we said so. And it doesn't work, and it's not very inspirational. So really think about why, because it might be when you examine your reasons, there's no good reason for change at all. So the next thing is your thought process about change. Are you a positive person or are you a negative person? Are you thinking about where you want to be, or are you thinking about where you don't want to be? Now, I was fortunate enough to listen to somebody talk about this a few years ago, and I felt that this was really, really a key point. Are you aiming for something, or are you trying to avoid something? Now, we've all heard the Amazon story about when they have a great day on sales, they all get in a room and they look to try and understand why they've done well, rather than the 99% of the rest of the companies out there where we scrutinize poor performance to within an inch of its life. And if we have a good day, we just don't worry about it and carry on and wait for the next bad day. If you think about it, in your life, if you are aiming for having a great career, having a great job, having a happy marriage, having a fast car, having success and fulfillment, opposed to you're trying to avoid having financial troubles. You don't want to be unhappy. You don't want to get divorced. You don't want to be in poverty. You can see the difference in the mindset. In one, you are 100% focused on where you want to be. In the other, you are 100% focused on negative things, everything you want to avoid in your life. If you're trying to overcome a change, or you're trying to get to the other side of something, it's really important to pick out the positives, because the negatives will always be there, but they will not help you achieve where you want to be. So always try and flip it. If you find your mindset, your change mindset is focusing on what you're trying to not be, see what the other side of that coin is. And keep it personal. When we talk about change as well, we talk about diversity a lot these days. We talk about other people's opinions and making sure everyone's included and inclusive, which is all great, but I personally think we don't necessarily stick with that when it comes to implementing change. I think we're fine with letting everyone have an opinion and everyone can be involved as long as they do what we say and don't question too much. And that actually is very ineffective. And it's also very ineffective on a personal level, because when we think about ourselves, we can have certain expectations about ourselves and our way of dealing with things. We may think that we should be able to handle this change. We may think that we should be able to talk to this person in our lives and get them to see our point of view, but sometimes we just can't. Sometimes with where we are in our heads and in our minds and in our hearts, we're not able to have those kind of conversations. So it's very important when you think about change and you think about the people around you and you think about yourself, that you ask yourself some important questions about, are you able to do this? Are you able to get the outcome that you want? And are you in a good place? Are the people around you, and do you understand them and their motivations? And this stretch is my favorite way of trying to really get to the bottom of understanding a change and its impact on people, or understanding the people around you. So I want to share it with you. So this is all about the stretch circles. This is so simple and it's so easy to replicate, and I'd urge you to think about it, and it can be applied to any aspect of your life. So the idea of the stretch circles is essentially this is a replication of you as an individual. It could be your team, it could be your product. So in the center is the core. For simplicity, we'll keep this as thinking about us as individuals. So your core is the stuff that is the center of you. I'm not talking about morals or values here, because we're talking about executing change. This is your core capabilities. It's your preferences, how you like to operate, your skill set. It's the kind of the stuff you do without thinking too much about it. So if you're a Java developer, it would probably be coding in Java. If you're a bit shy, it might be that you like to communicate people on Skype. It could be that you enjoy writing documentation. That might be in the middle. I can't imagine that's a lot of you in the room. So it can be made up of really anything that you see that's central to who you are and what you do and what you enjoy. The second circle out, stretch, that's when you use aspects of things that are in your core and you apply them in new ways. So it might be, if you're a Java developer, that you move to a new company and you're still coding in the same language, but you have to learn a new product suite. It might be, if you're the person that likes to communicate with people by Skype, you might need to make some phone calls. So you would, therefore, you know how to talk to people, you've got this, you do it at home all the time, but in a work environment with people you're not familiar with, it's a little bit awkward. So you're feeling stretched, it's a step out of your norm. If you're not that keen on writing documentation, maybe it's writing some documentation. You've done it before, but you hate it. So you have to apply yourself in a certain way. Then we get out to super stretch. So super stretch is where the magic happens. This is where the saying, you don't know what you're capable of until you try, comes from. So for a Java developer, this may be taking a massive leap into a new coding language, something they've always wanted to do. They've got they know coding, they know code, they know developing, but it's going to be some training, they're going to have to read about it, they're going to have to find out if they're any good at it. For your Skype communicator that's gone to phone calls, this could be a face-to-face conversation. This could be a big deal for that individual, and it's going to take them right out of their comfort zone. For somebody who can't stand documentation, as maybe somebody who's come through university, never had to do this stuff, or self-taught coder, worked in quite a progressive environment where documentation isn't key, they might find themselves working in one of the other less progressive organizations where this stuff has to be done. For them, this will be super stretch. They don't know how to do it, they don't want to do it, and they can't see the point in doing it. So they are out in super stretch. Now, when you're thinking about your businesses, or your products, or your teams, or yourselves, it's easy to apply this thinking. And just to map yourself a little picture of where you think the different aspects of whatever you're thinking about that time fit in these circles. Now, the reason that's important is because super stretch is where the magic happens, but it's also a very scary place. It is somewhere not to hang out for too long, because people in super stretch for any length of time experience deep stress and anxiety, and it's actually bad for mental health. So identifying when you're pushing in super stretch, be it in your personal life or in your work life, or you're asking people around you to operate in super stretch, is really important. And as a leader of people, it's actually a responsibility that you need to manage closely. So how do we apply that? Very, very simply, and I'd urge you to give this a go. The way that I apply this, for myself and with my teams, is you can do as I've just said. You can map out where you think you are, where you think your skill sets are. But one of the good ways to do it is to think about something you're trying to achieve, or something you're asking your team to achieve. And then get them, themselves, to break that down into 5 things. The 5 things they think they will need to do to make that outcome. The reason this is really important is because when I said about the fact that we talk about valuing diversity and people's differences, but we very rarely actually empower people to say, how do you think you're going to achieve this outcome? So by asking a group of people or an individual, how do you think you're going to do this, you've already got their engagement. Then I would ask that individual or that group of people, or even yourself, to map out those 5 things on their circle. Is this core? Is each element of those 5 things core, stretch, or super stretch? Every objective we set ourselves, our departments, our products, our businesses, should have elements of all 3. Never more than 1 element of super stretch because it's dangerous for our own well-being. Never fully core. The problem with core is it's great, it's like a blanket of fluffiness and it's a nice, warm, cozy place. But if we hang out in core for too long, if we let our teams do it or our businesses, we get smaller. It's like being in a too familiar place for too long. You start to get less and less able to push out of it. So we must understand at what level we're operating all the time. If you find that you map out one of your objectives, an example may be that you've got a product and you want to hit a new market. Maybe you want to diversify from finance into insurance, which sounds deeply exciting. If you look at that on your product, you map that out, you might find that actually hitting the insurance market straight away looks like super stretch. You're like, how do we do this? This is way out there. We haven't got any grounding in that area, but you can make super stretch much more accessible. Thinking about what you've got in stretch, it might be that you've got some customers who are already thinking about moving into new markets. Maybe you can use them. You've got the existing customer base, so you're starting to feel a bit more core. You're starting to feel a bit more centered. It's about looking at this realistically and understanding how you can reduce the risk profile and as human beings, how we can engage with it more readily. So that's a little gift to you, and hopefully that will make sense in your own lives. The next part of this is about personal reaction to change. When we are the change makers or the change takers, we have a responsibility to ourselves to decide how we want things to go. How do we want this to feel? How do we want it to look? What we can't control is what other people think about it and how they react towards us and towards the change. Now, I called this presentation, I've completely forgotten what I called this presentation. What did I call this presentation? It's not me, yeah, exactly. It's not me, it's you. There we go. The point being, we've all been there. We've all been in situations where somebody's executing change on us and we don't like it. Or somebody's not getting our point of view. And they're being obstructive or defensive, or they're making our lives difficult. And you can literally be in, this isn't me, this is you. You're the one with the problem. The point about it is, nobody remembers what the other person did. All we remember is how we reacted in the moment. We remember the time we ran from the Stansted boardroom in tears. That happened. Because somebody was saying something I didn't like, I couldn't handle it. In the moment, I couldn't handle it. I was upset, I was distressed, I left. Still remember it. Still remember the HR lady coming to find me in the toilets. You can't get over that stuff. It's imprinted in my head. When you are confronted with things you don't like, especially during change, how you react to it is how you remain in control of that situation. Count to 10, give yourself some time to think about it. Give the people around you some time to think about it. Reaction is not a necessary outcome of every feeling and everything you experience. Sometimes you're far stronger not to react at all until you've had a chance to think about things. And then, not everyone gets it. This guy doesn't get it. He's angry. The other point about change is we want people to understand our point of view. We want them to feel the same way that we feel, and we want them to experience things the same way that we do. We want them to be excited about the change we're making, and we want them to engage with it. And when they don't, that can really piss you off. What is the problem with these people? And we can go to great lengths to try and explain our reasons. because it almost is an affront to us as individuals when people don't understand us and what we're trying to achieve. You are wasting your time. If you have been clear about what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, and what outcomes you're measuring, accept that some people are not going to get it. And don't waste your time trying to explain it. Allow them and respect their point of view to just be. What happens at the end of it will happen at the end of it, but don't try and enforce your opinion on everyone. And the next thing is know your limits. And I've just quite deliberately shown this guy walking out of a door because I think, for me personally, I've worked in lots of different places, I've done lots of different jobs, but the one thing that has always been true is that when I've moved on because I couldn't stay. I've known that I've wanted something different, and I've known I'm not going to get it from where I am. Now, I know that everyone isn't the same. Lots of people have a lot more staying power than I do, and they stay in places, and they live and they work through these issues, and often that horrible CIO that doesn't know what he's doing comes and goes, and those people ride the wave and they get through the other side. If you have that kind of mental staying power and that works for you, that's great. But if it doesn't, sometimes you've just got to cut your losses and run. So allow yourself to experience that, and also be mindful for the people around you that that might be where they are. It doesn't hurt sometimes to acknowledge that for some people what you're asking is too much. So know your limits and appreciate other people have their limits too. Then you need to believe like a cat poster. You have to believe in change. You really do. And the more audacious your change is, and the bigger the change that you're aiming for, and the higher you're going, the more important it is that you believe in what you're doing. If you believe in what you're doing, the people around you will be able to engage with it. If you don't believe in what you're doing deep down inside, don't do it. Take some time, think about it again, because if you execute a change you didn't truly believe in, you can guarantee the outcome will not be good. Executing change and then trying to reverse out of it is incredibly hard. So always be clear about what you're doing, have purpose, and believe in what you're attempting to achieve. So we remember this little chap. He is not happy. This is Christmas Day, would you believe? The presents are open, he's not in a good space. Well, that was taken in 2000, no, not 2000, that was a long time ago, 19-something. And this was taken 3 years ago. So this is my son, Jake, who is the center of my world, and I love him dearly. This was taken in New York when I'd won an award that for the company I worked for, a global award, and they shipped us both first class out to New York to go and not drink, because he was only 18, for 4 days. I went in solidarity with him and didn't drink. The reason I'm showing this to you now is because it is all about the power of belief, and it is about understanding that sometimes you can find yourself in some really crappy places. As much as you plan for change and you try and understand it and you try and execute it beautifully, the world is not predictable. There is illness, businesses fold, you end up having a baby, things happen. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. When I was younger, in picture one, people used to say to me, "Oh, you wouldn't change it though, would you?" Bloody would. When I was pregnant with my son, people used to stop me in the street and have a go at me. That happens. You wouldn't think it happens, but it does. People used to ask me, you know, what sort of loser I was I married, you know, that I was going to be a drain on society for the rest of my life. I didn't need to hear it because it was what I felt inside. But it's not the truth. You can be what you want to be, you can all achieve what you want to achieve, and you can take your teams with you. So I guess the end note to all of this is hopefully the lessons that I've shared will be helpful. Like I say, I think at times in my life when I needed this most, when I was on my own, when I didn't understand how to get myself out of a difficult situation, I didn't know this stuff. This has come to me through many years of working in lots of different places, listening to lots of things and trying lots of different approaches with different people. So although I am by no means an expert on this situation or this conversation, hopefully some of that can be applied in your own world and make your lives a little bit easier. And that is where we end the speech. I don't know, am I meant to ask if there's any questions? Any questions? No? Good. Right. I'm not going anywhere anyway. I will be here for the rest of the day, signing autographs and T-shirts. But thank you very much for listening. I hope that was interesting. Thank you.